Alright, how's it going, guys? So today, we're doing something that's never been done before. Okay, I lied, it's been done before. But this has a very important reason behind it. This is one of the first, it's not the first, not by a long shot, but it's one of the first Paladin multi-class tier lists. Most specifically, this one's actually kind of breaking some rules. So the reasoning behind this is because I personally, in a lot of groups that I play with from my day-to-day, typically do not care on whether you combine 5th and 6th edition classes. So for the entire purpose of this is this will be going over certain 6th edition changes and how it plays into it. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm generally pretty familiar with all the 6th edition changes, but I made most of this script towards 5th edition and didn't think to update it to next D&D till recently, So a lot of the script is still the same, a lot of the tier list is about the same, but some things are buffed. Like, Barbarians got some quality of lives, Bards, Clerics got like hella buffed for some of their, subclasses. Monks a lot more fulfilling, it's a lot more generalist, so it may be more applicable to Paladin than it is in my tier list, So a lot of this stuff is subjective. And I will only be fully familiar with 6th edition changes with the 2 types that I've played, which happen to be Sorcerer, Warlock, and Sorcerer, Sorcerer, or Padlock, Warlock. And I'll go over, just D to S, and I'll really hammer in the ones that I most suggest. Because typically, Sorcerer, Warlock cover, pretty much every single playstyle you could want to do. Now, you may want to occasionally dip into Cleric, you may want to go Barbarian if you want to be a true tank, you want to go Fighter if you want a little bit of buffs, But ultimately, I think, and I'll get into this a bit more later, but I think Warlock is the best, smash and grab type of gameplay, while Sorcerer, I think, is the best, utility, the best full caster, as close as you can get to while playing Paladin, of course. So we'll get into that a bit later. For right now, the first one is Monk, and you know where it's going since it's first. D. Now, I'm pretty sure this will be the only D tier. And the reason why Monk is D tier is because one of the, and I'll just be giving a usual choice of equipment. Of course, niches always exist, but the examples that I'm giving here are generally going to be the best generalist options. They're not heavily oriented one way or another, with the exception of the first two I suggested, Padlock, Sorcerer, whatever. Those ones are kind of locked in because they encourage such play very well. And if you're wanting to play with one, you should probably use the other, unless you're wanting flavoring, which is very important in a lot of campaigns. But this is just, for theory crafting. This also gives people, the ability to say, hey, my character, I want them to be a Monk Paladin. How's that going to play out? Well, essentially with Monk Paladin, you're wanting 5 levels of Monk and 15 levels of Paladin. Now, generally be like Paladin 1, probably Monk. I don't know. I might even say Paladin 1, Monk 3 to get Way of the Kensei, and then Paladin 5. Then the rest of the 2 in Monk, then the rest of Paladin. And the benefits is that your key points can give Paladin certain combat options, especially if you're in a campaign where you may be commanded to drop your weapon. Your weapon may break or take a toll on you. Maybe you pick up a cursed weapon, you already sold your main weapon. But even if you can use the deflect missile feature, which means that with a lot of monk abilities, you can't use heavy weapons, especially the Way of the Kensei. It fits with paladins as long as you use like finesse, light weapons, even dual wielding. But you're discouraged from bringing a shield if you want to deflect missiles, which is one of the monk's best abilities, short of, Tavern Brawler Monk. And then you'll find that you're not wanting to use your heavy weapons either. So the entire reason of playing Paladin, for heavy armor, which you can still wear as far as I'm aware, they may prefer light or medium because of the monk, but you're discouraged from using heavy weaponry, which you have proficiency in because you are a paladin. You're discouraged from using a shield, which you typically have proficiency in because you're a paladin. So monk is just an anti-synergy, if you ask me. Even when you combine it with something like Paladin Oath of Vengeance, which, 15 levels in Oath of Vengeance is pretty strong, but personally I'd rather 5 more levels in Paladin, at any rate, than 5 in Monk, even if the flavoring is kind of cool. Now, the second one is kind of iffy. Now, the second one is Wizard. I could put it in the top of D, because, it may actually deserve it. Wizard is one of those classes where if you don't go full levels in it, it's kind of bad. Even Sorcerer, one of my favorite examples of this, one that, dips better than Wizard. It kind of lends itself to, if you're wanting the utility, you're kind of wishing you just went the full caster. But sometimes your hands are tied, sometimes you need a tank. And Wizard allows you to, learn all level 1 scrolls that you can. So the second you go into a large kingdom, you're able to buy these scrolls. You're able to learn any level 1. If you want to take more levels in Wizard, it's less of a dip, and more of 6 in Paladin, 14 in Wizard, that's plenty fine. It'll be a little clunky, It's almost like an anti-synergy, because if you take 1 in Paladin, 2 in Wizard, then the rest in Paladin, the Wizard benefits come online early, So Paladin gets almost all their features, and they get some of the early level features, such as Mind Sliver and Shield, which are very volatile options when it comes to tanking. So because of that, taking a 2-level dip in Wizard is pretty viable, especially when you combine it with the skill Arcane Recovery, which gives you some extra Divine Smite options, as well as, stacking on top of the 1 free smite a day that you get in 6th edition. But otherwise, I think Shield is what puts it in C. And there's not much of an easier option to get Shield without feats. So I would much rather take a 2-class dip, personally, than eat one of my very limited feats. Even if it may deny you on your boon, or your 20th level oath. Your 20th level oath benefit that you get from your class feature. But personally, I've never had a campaign where I get to level 20. In my main one, we are planning on doing that. Emphasis on eventually. We are level 14 right now, and it's going to get, exponentially slower. 14 to 15 is going to be a lot slower than it was from 4 to 5. So you're not necessarily wanting to go to full level 20 with most classes, but that also means that your dips need to be much smaller. So it's because of that, I think Wizard, even a War Magic Wizard with any Paladin, doesn't synergize that well. Especially since you now need to swap between Strength, Charisma, the 3 stats that are important. Strength, Charisma, and sometimes Dexterity or Constitution. All very important for Paladin. But typically, with Paladin, intelligence is your dump stat. So that means you're wanting charisma casters. You're wanting things a lot closer to Warlock, Sorcerer, even like Bard, Cleric, even Druid synergizes quite a bit better than Wizard, which is why it's going on C. I'm tempted to put on D, may change that later in the video. We'll see. And then right next is Druid. Now, the main issue is that this is another 2-level dip. I believe it's the exact same in 6th edition, but this is, most of this was made in 5th edition. I'll give input wherever I know. I'm not going to speculate on the changes, because I haven't tested all these in 6th edition. But the Druid levels give Paladin access to Wild Shape, which is good for out of combat, because you kind of need to rely on a lot of Druid levels if you want to use Wild Shape in combat. However, if you multiclass into Druid, it gives you a broader pool of spells, such as Shape Water and the Healing Word spell. And it's because of that it... This is actually kind of hard. I was planning on putting it above Wizard, but I kind of like Shield a lot better than that. I would say the Wild Shape alone, especially if you're in a puzzle-heavy campaign, is a lot better. Because you can turn into like a weasel. If your DM allows it, you can use stuff like from the Witchlight. You can turn into a bee. You can use one of the newer ones, or the newer updated ones, where the 2024 version of the weasel actually has a stealth stat. So it's decent for the non-combat heavy parts of a campaign, good utility, which is why I'm ranking above the Wizard. But if you're wanting combat, probably rank Wizard above Druid. But I'll put it here because this is just a generalist tier list. Oh, sorry. Scroll down a little bit too much. Then, Cleric. Cleric is a hard one. This is one of those where diehard clerics would probably argue B. If we're saying like one class dip, it may be B, but I'll put in high C. Because if you take a one class dip in Forge Cleric, you have no equipment requirements that clash between them, so you're fine. You can be Cleric and go Paladin, or you can start Paladin, go Cleric, then Paladin. But I don't think it's worth, 50-50ing like 6-6, to get to level 12, which is a popular one, or 6-14. I think a 1 or 2 level dip is the best way to get stuff out of a Cleric's Divine Domain, especially Forge Domain, compared to doing the opposite. Because I think a 1 level Paladin dip isn't that strong. So you could either do like 1 level in Cleric and 19 in Paladin, or if you're really liking Cleric, you really like those domains, maybe even 6 in Paladin and 14 in Cleric. You can always experiment with it, especially since the Forge is a strong overall, +1 bonus to AC or attack and damage rolls. That means it comes online very strong at lower levels. Even higher levels, a +1 bonus to AC scales drastically. Because when you're getting like heavy armor as a paladin, like good plate armor, you're gonna find your AC is gonna be like 18, 19 with a +1 bonus, 21 if you put a shield on. It's decent, but at the same time, I can't find a good enough of a synergy with it to place it higher. Now, I guess, as far as flavoring goes, it's good flavoring. It's, a level 1 dip. It's not going to kill you. It scales up decently well. So maybe B. You could argue B, but I'm putting it high C for right now. Because the next one is Artificer. Now, this is, the stereotypical gun-toting build. Paladin with a cannon. You really can't beat it. Fucking try, he'll shoot you from a mile away. But taking a 3-class dip in Artificer, specifically the Battlesmith, synergizes pretty well with 17 levels in Paladin for Oath of the Crown. The Artificer spell list provides a lot of cantrips, a lot of really good cantrips. And you get first level spells like Guidance and Absorb Elements. Absorb Elements is crazy if you're needing to tank. Even if you're... It especially excels in a lot of campaigns, though, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Absorb Elements does necrotic damage. I may be wrong on that. I may be mistaken because I have the boon of resistance in my current campaign. But I think Absorb Elements is predominantly normal elements. I don't think it covers poisons or necrotic, so it may not be good in like Curse of Strahd or Necromancer campaigns. But the fact that the Artificer can infuse items and enchant weapons and armor means that your durability and effectiveness is strengthened, especially if you're able to find yourself creating a Steel Defender, which means that you get another tanky ally to protect your back line. You know, something to draw aggro even off of you, depending on how you enchant the Steel Defender. So for a non-charisma based spellcaster, it's not horrible. It's really not. But where the fuck is Artificer? Artificer is not here. So I will require a second. Give me 1 second. Alright, so with Artificer, I will actually... Well, there is the chance that you can make like crossbows, enchantments and stuff. I'll still probably rank it lower than Cleric. No, Cleric is just strong, even if it's not B tier necessarily, it's strong. Ranger Paladin. This one kind of hurts to put this high, but it's the only full synergy we've seen so far, rather than essentially a mini feat. So, favorite enemy or favorite foe, benefits from a Oath of Devotion's Paladin's bonuses against fiends or undead. Hunter's Mark is also a good source of, free damage. Doesn't need any wisdom for Paladin to use, and it allows bigger damage bursts with your Divine Smite. Considering it's the first full synergy we've seen, just a 3-level dip into Ranger with Hunter, then Oath of Devotion Paladin, good synergy. I really hate putting Ranger up here, but it's actually a synergy. So I'll put it here. Cleric, once again, it's technically not a synergy. It's not. It's a good dip. But the issue is that you can take it anywhere here. Okay, it's almost like a half beat, more so than it is a class dip. So I think Ranger's a bit better for burst damage. We have something better along the line, which is Rogue. Now, Rogue levels, especially when you take in like 8 levels in Rogue, you get Swashbuckler at level 3, 12 Paladin levels with Oath of Vengeance. That means that you're starting to get sneak attack damage. That's scaling like really well with your Divine Smites. The Swashbuckler Rogue uses Charisma for a lot of their features, meaning that as Paladin you're not needing to split as much as the earlier entries. This is one that I've actually wanted to experiment with. Because when you start out as Rogue, you get a lot of proficiencies. I think in 6th edition you get 2 expertise. So you may need to take a feat or something for armor, but if you're in a predominantly very story-heavy campaign, you may find yourself needing, those proficiencies, those expertise skills, more so than you will necessarily need the, heavy armor. Because as I said, you can use your Paladin spells to boost your AC by 2. You can potentially take a dip in Wizard. If you're not expecting to get to a level 20 campaign, maybe instead of 8 rogue levels, you do 6 rogue levels with Swashbuckler and do to Wizard to try and bump up your AC whenever you really need it during combat. But just the fact that you're unable to fail some rolls just because you have proficiency or expertise in some cases. You're so strong with these sneak attacks that it lets you kind of Nova better while you're still getting the multi-attack of a Paladin. So it's a pretty decent damage dealer whenever it comes to using your, Rakish Audacity feature, which gives you a proficiency on initiative rolls, tied to your charisma, which makes this a much better combination. Then you have, Uncanny Dodge, your evasion features, Cunning Action. All of them make you harder to hit, and therefore better tank because you're still absorbing blows without even taking the damage. So this one easily places itself on B. Then we have Fighters. Fighter is a good dip, especially if you're using Battlemaster or Champion for a 3-level dip. It's good because you're getting a extra fighting style. You're able to get more, methods of combat, some methods of defense if you're wanting to take any shield or martial related feats to allow disadvantage on attacking your teammates or less damage if they're within 5 feet of you. Not to mention you're getting Second Wind and Action Surge, two very potent combinations that really let the Paladin shine. Now, I really tempted to put Fighter in A, but we have some things coming up. We have Barbarian. Now Barb is, Barb's a lot more on the fence. It's either low A or high B. I'm going to put an A for the sake of this tier list. Everything's, subjective. It's fine. But if you take 6 levels in Barbarian to be a Zealot Barbarian, 14 levels in anything you want for Paladin, you can't use heavy armor, but when you're raging, you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, which is an amazing way on where you can mitigate damage while still not denying popping a shield. Maybe Gem of the Metallic Dragon if you're wanting to take a feat. Not to mention Barbarians have the biggest hit dice in the game with a D12 hit dice. And Divine Smite can be used while raging, because it doesn't qualify as a spell being cast as far as 5th edition goes, so it bypasses the rage's restriction on spellcast. Now, funny enough, I said that this is a 5th and 6th edition tier list. If we're talking 6th edition, it's still strong, but the fact that you can't Divine Smite on it is a deal breaker for many people. I personally don't Divine Smite all that often. I don't like Novaing. I'd rather keep it for utility, or when I feel it'd be a better chance to use the Smite rather than Novaing every combat. But if you're very, spam Smite heavy, it might be C. Might be high C for you. But I think in terms of generalist utility, A. Easy A, especially if you're wanting to tank easy A, even with 6th edition counting as spell slots, which is optional. I haven't met a single DM yet that says, you can't not count it as a spell. Haven't met a single DM yet. If anything, DMs seem to be mad that they can counterspell it now, because they're just well, this is different. I don't like it different. And, anyway, sorry, yeah, I had this conversation with my DM, and he's just I don't want to deal with 6th edition stuff. It's yeah, it's fine. Because, 6th edition is a big jump from 5th. And, of course, Paladin. Not much to say with this one. The image was here. Hey, I forgot the image was here. I was looking at my script, and I was wait, why do I have 4 images? Paladin, you can't beat it. If you want to be, a slashy, tanky guy, Paladin. Actually, you know what's funny? I'll put Paladin directly in the middle. I think a straight Paladin is not the strongest. Yeah, I'll put it directly in the middle. It's not the strongest, but, it doesn't hurt to ever go fully in any multi-class. I just think the utility from your casters, which, if you haven't noticed, it's all we have left, is extremely strong. So of course, there is Paladin? I don't know. Paladin Bard. Easy A. I don't think it's quite in that S tier, but easy A. Because you get that multi-class casting from a full caster. You know, lot of spell choices with Charisma has the spellcasting ability, so it synergizes very well with Paladin features. If you take take 6 levels in Paladin, just so that you get the Aura of Protection, then 14 levels in Bard, you're pretty set. You get Bardic Inspiration with its number scaling on Charisma, much like Divine Sense, which is sadly removed in 6th edition. It's now a Channel Divinity feat, which sucks for a lot of story campaigns, but for fighting campaigns, it's pretty decent. And then Jack of all trades means that the Paladin is capable with pretty much any skill, which once again, good for generalists, good for story campaigns. Overall, Bard Paladin has a lot of things going for it, especially if you take the Paladin later. It has a lot of cool story aspects going for it. Or maybe your Bard turns to a religious aspect, especially when you do Oath of Devotion. It's so centered on the Charisma score. Even like improving your weapon by adding the Charisma modifier to it, it's a no-brainer as far as considering 5th or even like 5th and 6th edition multiclassing. Now I think Bard in 6th edition is much stronger than it is in 5th. In 5th I might actually even rate it lower than Barbarian. Well no, in 5th I would say higher than Barbarian. But 6th, I don't know. Because Barbarian does fall off in 6th. So I don't retract that, act like I didn't say anything. I don't know. Maybe it might be swappable between A and B. Because I think I don't know, I can't put it one lower, but there's nothing else A. You know, it's a little worse in 5th edition than it is 6th. Because so much Bard spells got buffed in 6th edition. You know, just one of them is like, I think Silvery Barb's got a little bit buffed. Might be mistaken on that. Then they changed a lot of saving check spells when it comes to Bard. I can't think of anything specifically with Bard, but I know that I have a Bard in my party, and oftentimes we say take the newer spells because they're typically stronger. And the only one that's coming to mind is True Strike, and I know that's not what we told them to take. Anyways. Then we move on to Hexblade Warlock. Now, this is an S, so you know it's good. But, 3-level dip, you can't go wrong. 3 levels in Hexblade. You only really need 1. You can potentially get away with 1 level dip for 6th edition. But, I don't think that the padlock is really that good. You only have 2 packed slots by level 3, so that's only like 2 extra Divine Smites, and it is a Charisma spellcaster, so it gives you Eldritch Blast and a Agonizing Blast Invocation. But you'll find, like, it comes online early and falls off quickly. Hexblade, it's always pretty good, but I think the Eldritch Blast Invocation the Eldritch Blast cantrip gets really weak if you're not going full Warlock. Because 2 swings of that sword will almost always beat that, it will almost always beat the Eldritch Blast. Each and every time. Just because, unless you have guaranteed crits on that Eldritch Blast, it's doing less damage, with a 3d10 at level 17, I think. Yeah, level 17, 3d10, because you get 3 blasts. Even when you're putting Agonizing Blast in that, 3d10 tends to be less than, like, what do you have on your weapons by the time you're level, like, 12 or something? You have a 2d6 or like a 2d8 sometimes. So 2 swings with that, and you'll be higher on average than your smites. Than your Eldritch Blasts. And that's before any of your smites. So I think when you're using the Hexblade aspect, that's where this shines. Eldritch Blast on Paladin, I think, is a wash, especially once you start getting into artifacts, you start getting into rare weapons. A lot of campaigns will outclass Eldritch Smite very quickly. That's the biggest issue with this. But if we're looking purely at Hexblade, the blade part of the Hexblade, it's decent. I think it has some of the most consistent damage out of anything on this tier list. And, it gives you access to some things, especially in 6th edition, you get invocations. So you can pick up Devil's Sight to see in the dark if your race doesn't have it automatically. You can pick Pact of the Tome for extra spells. You can even take 2 ritual spells with Pact of the Tome. Or you can pick Pact of the Blade. That's a pretty decent one. I think that was base kit in 5th edition, but now it's an invocation. But you get an extra invocation. So by the time you reach level 5, I think it is, you'll get a third or fourth. You'll get a third Eldritch invocation. And honestly, for as potent as it is, it's really boring. I find myself in my current campaign, I'm not currently going Warlock Paladin, but essentially your only job is to walk up to something, if you can walk up to it, smack it, Divine Smite, maybe even Eldritch Smite if you're feeling spicy, and then you're done. You don't have any utility. You need to rely so heavily on your full casters. And that means if they go down, if your healer goes down, you don't have a lot of options for a full party revive. You don't even have that many options to actually revive and attack in the same combat round. That's just not very open to you. Which is why, at the top of S tier, is... Sorry, I keep on... Lost it. Where's the page? Oh, okay. Is Sorcerer Paladin. Sorcerer, my beloved. Now, why do I love Sorcerer Paladin? Well, with 6 levels of Paladin, you don't get to Aura Protection, and 14 levels in Sorcerer, I personally love Wild Magic. Because with Wild Magic, once per long rest, you get to choose which effect you want from the table. And if you're playing anything like me and my group, we're using a custom table that we found online, which has a lot of cool options. It's the default one, but I think every single number, 1 to 100, has a different effect. Now, the new 6th edition Wild Magic is a lot better, actually. And especially when you're looking at 6th edition Warlock, they're buffing a lot of the patrons. So Warlock may eventually out-tier Sorcerer. But the main issue here is that stuff like Shadow Magic, is that stuff like, the Clockwork Magic, the Wild Magic. Everything on Sorcerer makes the Paladin have more utility, more spell slots. You're getting meta magic. So as I said, you can revive someone potentially, and on the same turn use both of your attacks. Especially when you take feats like Warcaster. Those sorcery points give you more Divine Smites, to the point where you have almost too much Divine Smites. I think you can Divine Smite nearly every single attack if you go Sorked and you're level 14-ish. It's kind of silly. And of course, Wild Magic's actually pretty good support. A lot of people underrate it. A lot of people vividly remember I cast Fireball on myself because I rolled a 43, I think it was. And it's not that way these days. Unless you use the custom one, and even then, by the time you're level 10, even your squishiest of party members, unless they have a artifact like my bard currently does, he has less than 30 health. Fireball on him would kill him if he failed to save. But, even your squishiest of party members, artifacts aside, can survive a fireball. But you want to know what's more likely to do? More likely to give you haste for one turn. It's more likely to turn all your spells into bonus actions. It's more likely to give you temporary HP, healing, the ability to teleport. I love wild magic. Can't get enough of it. But, shadow magic and clockwork, the ability to, turn invisible, to manipulate rolls is also a very potent ability. And it's because of that meta magic, because of the, pure amount of spell slots, which is why, for me, I almost like Bard more than Warlock. Just that Hexblade synergizes is a lot better, and that's why Hexblade is an S tier. And I'm mainly making this video because whenever people suggest things, and this is basically my call-out video, people are always like, Warlock, Pallock, you want Hexblade Paladin. It's boring. It's overdone. And when compared to Sorcerer, to Bard, even Barbarian, it's not even the best. Hell, a lot of what Warlock does, sorry, this is my streaming setup. I thought I had that muted. Whoops. Yeah, this is my streaming setup. Welcome to my streaming setup. I stream over at twitch.tv/datacat if you're ever curious. Links on screen. And sorry, I truthfully wasn't playing on that plug. It just randomly popped up in the middle of the recording session. Oh, I haven't been paying attention. I hope it hasn't done that more than once. But, Warlock is just boring. You're rolling the same dice on the same weapon. You have no utility slots outside of combat. You get 2, no extra spells from it. Meanwhile, sorcerers. There are so many sorcerer spells that can only be found on Wizard and Druid, or Wizard and Bard. Some spells are just Sorcerer, Wizard only. Sorcerer, Wizard, Warlock only. So, Sorcerer gets stronger before you need to invest 14 levels in it. I'm a level 14 Sorcerer, and I already feel like I have the utility of some of my full casters, even though I have 6 levels in Paladin. It's that strong. I can't recommend it enough, trust me. It's an amazing way to go from, not being able to do much aside from tank, to suddenly you can cast twin spell haste. Suddenly you can, quicken spell haste on yourself, so it's a bonus action. You can quicken spells with a bonus action like Lay on Hands to heal someone 30 points instantly. It's by far the best combination. And it's not even close. Sure, in 6th edition, you can get most of Hexblade's benefits with a invocation. That's the truth, you can. So you could potentially use something like the Celestial, because I think the Celestial Patron Warlock is pretty strong, especially when combined with Paladin. Though, you'd probably want to take 6 Paladin, 14 Warlock, compared to my suggestion of 3 Hexblade, 17 Paladin. So there's some give and take there. But ultimately, I think Sorcerer outclasses Warlock, especially in 6th edition, where you see a lot of Warlock stuff getting gutted in a vie to make Eldritch Spam a little less appealing, to make them more generalists. So even when you compare, their 6th edition versus 5th edition counterparts, I think Sorcerer's just much more appealing. This is my call-out post. I'm not afraid to say it. Yeah, that's about it for this video. I don't know how I'll edit it. I'm gonna be fully honest with you. May just be a simple video. I might just smack music on this and have this be a rant post. But, for right now, thank you everyone who bothered watching this video. If you want more, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Give me a suggestion for my next post. This was made in a 30 minutes, a fever dream I had at 11 p.m. at night. It's not meant to be a good video. In fact, I might just put music on this just so I can get an upload. But if you're wanting more D&D content, I can definitely start cranking that out. I'm not afraid to start doing D&D content. I'm streaming either every day or every other day over at my Twitch. So feel free to catch me there. Same name as here, the datacat. And yeah, thank you guys for your support this past month or two. It's been insane. And yeah, sorry for the low effort post. I just needed to get my foot in, and in a manic stupor, I just kind of said, hey, what's the best time to do this? 11:30 at night. Why not? But yeah, I'll stop rambling, and I'll see y'all next time, which will be pretty soon if any of you guys like this. So stay tuned. Peace.